Well, welcome, folks. Look, first of all, any similarities you may detect with anything that Matthew Rigby said in the past, it's no coincidence. However, to get him to speak today cost several $1,000s, and I sort of work for a cup of coffee and a muffin. Okay, here we go. Here's the fancy slide. That's the fancy stuff. So, of course, it's not trying to mystify, it's all about demystifying. And what I try and do, I think, at my school, with my boys and with my teachers, is trying to unlock something that they might... It's like a horse getting spooked at a jump. You know, we don't want them to be spooked at the jump. It's easy. Look, if we can understand what we're trying to do here, we might have half a chance of being successful at it. So, you know, we have a various mixture of students. The students that start at my school in Year 7 very rarely resemble the same cohort at Year 12, so they come in at different times. Like every other school, they come in from, we have lots of boarders from Australia and overseas. We have boys who come for various reasons, sporting, academic, and so how do we communicate to all of those guys this same concept? And the analytical exposition is something that they're going to have to encounter in their lives as students, in their lives after school perhaps. And so let's just try and get it right. Let's try and understand what it is that we're trying to do. Now, we were facing Hamlet last term with my Year 12s, and I was getting them to write an unseen essay about Hamlet, and I was having lots of belly aching in the class about them not understanding the text and Shakespeare, and how do we? There's too much to understand, and so there was this real struggle with the content, and then there's this genre that you have to teach them that they have to write, and there's a real tension, I think, between how important is the content and how important is this structure that we have to write. And I'm sort of tending towards the structure is pretty important, and that we can write a pretty good essay with pretty little knowledge and information. A couple of years ago I wrote a sample essay for my 12s about Richard III, and I hadn't seen Richard III since the 80s sometime. A fellow called Paul Sherman, I think was his name. Paul Sherman? Sherman. Came out to Australia in the 80s and did the Now Is the Winter of Our Discontent. I could do that all day. May Glorious Summer by this son of York. Now that's the Olivier version, I think. Anyway, look, I was able to look up a few quotes, had a rough idea what the play was about, and wrote a fairly good essay, but concentrating more on the structure of the essay rather than on the content of the essay. So I wanted to prove to the students that, look, you're not going to become an expert in Hamlet in these few weeks that we're going to do it. You need to know something. At the end of it, we'll be probing some of that knowledge. But what you're going to have to do is articulate this knowledge in a rational argument, and that's part of the game too. So on my way to class, I thought, well, how can I demonstrate some of these ideas to these guys and to demystify it? And for some reason, this line came into my head. So just give that a read for a second. So give me a home where the buffalo roam. You feel the singer. Okay, and so it was like, okay, here's 4 lines, and they look kind of corny, and you may not have even heard them, the students in the class, but most of us here might have heard it once or twice. And then I just sort of asked them, well, here's these 4 random lines, and let's see what we can extract from them. And so I'll just get you guys to do a little bit of a warm-up in your own heads. Just look for some of those, ask some of those questions of that 4-line text, and just kind of see what you can extract or squeeze out of those 4 lines. I'll give you a couple of seconds. I teach 2 Year 12 English classes, one because of the subjects that they choose are fairly bright, and one because of the subjects they choose aren't so academic. But I did the same exercise with both classes, and it was, that they both did it really well. So they were coming up with things like this. So some of these are my ideas, and some of them are theirs. I don't want to keep turning. Okay, one is, so there's a yearning demand for a new home, with the words, oh give me a home. There's a desire for an ideal country life in a new location. A new location is clearly important in the repetition of the where. So when we start looking at the grammar of something, that sort of exposes some meaning as well. There's a metaphoric reference to these wished-for happy days as cloudless skies. The writer is leaving behind the clouds of the city life where darkness does not shadow him. Maybe it's a dream for an untouched wilderness where humans have no impact and nature is pristine. It's a desire for a life of adventure, perhaps. It's about a new location, a new place, physical and psychological. Maybe if we dwell just on the buffalo, then it might be a desire for something in the past that doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, wow, we were just sort of firing with that class coming up with all these ideas. And so it's kind of proving to them that they can extract some information out of something that initially doesn't seem to be offering up too much. And then as well, what do we do with that information? Well, what if we pose a question to it like we would a novel or a play? So through an analysis of the lyrics, explain what the songwriter's key message is. Well, then when we ask a question like that, well, the answer to that question becomes our thesis in one of these things called an analytical exposition or analytical essay. So maybe our thesis could read something like that. So the verse reveals the songwriter's deep yearning for a life that is an escape from the pressures and claustrophobic confinement of city life. He pleads for this new life to be in the open country and not tainted with negative human relationships. That sounds okay. When I sort of try and get students to develop theses in their essays, I try and think, well, let's not be too stark with them. Let's have a thesis that's got some meat to it that we can, so when we come back to referring to that thesis and trying to restate that thesis, there's enough there for us to play with. Okay, well, we'll get more on that as we go. All right. So, a brief break in action. I might do this so I can read what I've got down here. So, trying to, in the demystification process, when we start looking at what one of these essays is like, well, it's sort of like, well, what we're asking to do has been done thousands of times before, and it's a structure that just makes sense. There's a logic to it, and it's a logic that's been used, for centuries really. So we're not sort of creating something new. We're just trying to understand what it is that is being done and why it's being done. So we're just going to have look at a couple of examples of some other texts, but other texts that do similar things. So we're going to have a look at the something from the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon. And we're going to have a look at the start of a Ken Burns documentary. When I was at the University of Queensland many years ago, there were a few axioms. One was that Shakespeare is the greatest writer in the English language. One was that the greatest piece of prose in the English language was written by a guy called Edward Gibbon, which is the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And avoid any subject that involves James Joyce. I only fell for that one once. Okay, so Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I've just greyed out some of it so we don't have to read everything. So this is in the preface. So he goes blah 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 about stuff, and then he's talking about that. I have presumed to lay before the public a first volume only of the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. So this is in what was it? The date's up there, 1760 something. It will perhaps be expected that I should explain in a few words the nature and limits of my general plan. So he's just having this general preamble in his first preface about, here I am, this is what I'm trying to do. He's breaking one of those rules about referring to himself, but he was so big and famous that he could in his own histories. Okay. Then he gives us the thesis for the whole history. The memorable series of revolutions which in the course of about 13 centuries gradually undermined and at length destroyed the solid fabric of human greatness. And so that's what he sets out to do in this pile of volumes that he writes over the next 13 years. Devotes his whole life to it. And he's able to set it out fairly briefly. And how's he going to do that? May with some propriety be divided into three of the following areas. And then he says the first of these periods, the second period, and the last and longest of these periods. And it looks to me like that's a fairly well-structured beginning to a very long essay that goes on for a long, long time. And I've been listening to some of this in the car on an iPad recently, and the guy sure can write. No two ways about that. So I certainly recommend you have a little delve into that. All right, where else is this sort of structure being used? Well, anytime you watch a decent documentary, I find, they do the same thing. They get us in with some interesting information, some background detail, they kind of set the scene for it. They tell us exactly what it is that we're going to get out of this documentary. And then they tell us how they're going to do that, just like the introduction to an essay will be. So, which we'll learn will be orientation, thesis, what are the points going to be. Okay? So just give me a second, I'll play the next bit. No, it won't take too long. Sorry, the IT guy who spent all that time. And I'll play a bit, just so we haven't wasted our time earlier. So it's a documentary called Unforgivable Blackness. Ken Burns, very famous American documentary filmmaker. And it's about the rise and fall of Jack Johnson, not the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And here is the first, I won't tell you, because this is the information that's going to tell you. Well, what I want you to be listening for is general sort of background setting information. I want you to listen then for particular stages of his life that will be examined, but then also to listen for a theme that is going to, we will expect will be developed through the whole documentary. It's a two-part documentary. Okay, so general information, specific detail through his history, and then what's this theme that you might think is going to develop?
On the morning of July 4th, 1910, 15 special trains pulled into the little desert town of Reno, Nevada. Aboard were thousands of white men who had paid their way across the country to see a prize fight unlike any that had ever taken place before. They had come to see their hero, the white ex-heavyweight champion Jim Jeffries, take back the title from the first African-American ever to hold it, Jack Johnson. It was, said the Chicago Tribune, going to be a contest between the white man's hope and the black peril. Somehow, in the minds of many white Americans, this boxing match would decide whose country America really was. Who was meant to be in charge.
There's a little bit more.
For more than 13 years, Jack Johnson was the most famous and the most notorious African American on earth. He battled his way from obscurity to the top of the heavyweight ranks, won the greatest prize in American sports, a prize that had always been the private preserve of white combatants, then suffered persecution at the hands of his own government, and years of exile before the title was taken from him. And he did all these things during the years which marked the low point of African American life after emancipation. Abandoned by the federal government, denied the vote if they lived below the Mason-Dixon line, and living under the constant threat of mob violence, black Americans at the turn of the 20th century were no longer enslaved, but not yet truly free. Jack Johnson insisted on being free. When whites ran everything, Jack Johnson took orders from no one. While most African Americans struggled merely to survive, Jack Johnson reveled in his riches and his fame. When black Americans were expected to defer to whites, Jack Johnson battered them to the ground. And at a time when the mere suspicion that a black man had flirted with a white woman could cost him his life, Jack Johnson slept with whomever he pleased. To most whites, and to some African Americans, Johnson was a perpetual threat, profligate, arrogant, amoral, a dark menace, and a danger to the natural order of things. The real Jack Johnson was both more and less than those who loved or those who hated him ever knew. Just remember, he told a young reporter not long before he died, whatever you write about me, that I was a man.
Okay, so certainly the first bit was setting the scene about where this thing was going. This big fight against this guy called Jim Jeffries. And then we get all this information that will be examined in much more detail throughout the documentary. And then hopefully you're picking up on what the big thesis is, the big theme about Jack Johnson insisted on being free. And that he took orders from no one. It's an incredible story if you haven't ever heard of him. It's an amazing story. There's so many stories about boxing. It's incredible, just wonderful stuff. Let's not get on to that. All right, so we've got to the central part of this presentation, which features the sample essay that's on the front of your handout. And we're going to work our way through that in part and look at the stimulus that the essay responds to. And then we're going to go through paragraph at a time. And now each paragraph we're just going to concentrate on a different idea. And in the process try and unlock some of these things that make up one of these essays. Okay, so it was a task that was set from year 10s. We were looking at advertising, and we decided to focus on advertising posters, and then we got into propaganda posters and posters about the environment, as well as posters about advertising products. It just kind of, one thing kind of led to another. And they were asked to analyse the key message being presented to a particular target audience in the chosen poster. Okay, and so my job, I think, was to try and find some good choices, some images that had enough in them, images that they could unpack, and that there was various elements of those images, and then in the course of constructing one of these essays, there was enough subject matter to deal with in one paragraph, and there was something else to talk about in another paragraph, and in another paragraph. Okay, so that's something we'll talk about a little bit later on too. Just the choice of stimulus, the choice of how we word questions, so that we allow students the opportunity to respond. Okay, sometimes we write questions that are just so confusing that when we go to write the response ourselves, we wondered how we were so stupid to set that question. Okay, so here are just a couple. Had some World War I propaganda posters, some environment posters, dangers of smoking, no dangers of drinking, that's a very healthy preoccupation. That's an ad for a tourist company, the one on the right. It's a shame it's a little bit dark, but okay. Now this is the one that our practice essay is going to be all about. So, let's do a bit of an unpack. There's Comrade Stalin. So, what are the key elements in this poster? Just have a think before I tell you. You already know. They're easy. We're going to look at his imposing body language. That's worth a paragraph, surely. We're going to talk about the symbolic use of the ship's wheel and other nautical references. What else could we talk about? Well, the omnipresent red flag of the communist movement, clearly juxtaposed with Stalin. All right, so we do some unpacking of the image. All right, there's my other fancy bit of PowerPointing there. All right, so what do we arrive at then? Stalin's a great leader, inspiring, strong, visionary, and true to the principles of communism. That sounds to me like a thesis. Okay, so we've got ourselves a thesis for this essay, and we've got ourselves 3 big chunks of information that are worth developing. Okay, so setting the scene. So just like the Edward Gibbon example, just like the unforgivable blackness example, let's give a bit of background information, or we could call it orientating information, or orientation to the topic. Whatever language you want to use, whatever language is going to be understood by your class group or that year level. Okay, we need to get them into the topic. I've just read a proof of one of the new textbooks that are coming out about the new syllabus, and when they were talking about the analytical exposition, they talked about a hook, as in maybe a quote, maybe not. I think we need to. I don't think analytical expositions need to be dry and dreary. I'm just sort of, my jury's still out about using terms like hook, though. But we certainly need to, let's establish some background information. So, pretty easy. The image is a propaganda poster for the USSR. So we talk about propaganda posters and why those things are used. All right, you've got that in front of you, so we don't need to read it word for word. And we're already half an hour through this. Okay, so what's the big point? Students must know that their essay has to have a thesis. Okay, and we colour code it because when we're talking about these things, we can say, well, if you colour coded this, where's your orientation? Where's your thesis? Where are your 3 key points? Because 3 key points seems like a good thing to develop for an essay about the length that we want to write in the school anyway. Okay, so in this case, the propagandist is conveying to the Soviet people, there's the audience, through the carefully selected imagery of the poster, the great strength of Stalin the man and Stalin the leader. The powerful symbolism also presents the dictator as an inspiring visionary and an upholder of the true principles of communism. Okay, and what are we going to talk about? Those things I've already mentioned. Imposing body language, symbolic use of the ship's wheel and other nautical references, and the omnipresent flag. Okay, so on your handout I think I've broken up that those 3 stages of that introduction in the kind of language that I use at school. Okay, so we've got ourselves an introduction, and it's just like those other couple that we saw, doing the same job. Okay. Now, we're still using teal language. I think some people are using teal or whatever, but doesn't matter. All right, so the topic sentence for our first paragraph will read something like this. The proud and confident figure of Stalin, the great leader, is the dominant figure of the image. So students have to know that in the topic sentence we must have the big idea that's going to be developed in that paragraph. And that's going to be the only idea that they're going to develop in that paragraph. All right, they have to just know some of these rules. And then we do a bit of a breakdown. We're going to discuss body language, we're going to talk about his gaze, his strength, as indicated by his strong hands and his broad shoulders. All right, so we have to do a bit of planning. One of my favourite quotes that my year 12s get sick of me quoting from Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." So plan before you write. Okay. If you think about it and you know exactly where it is you're going, then you're going to write something much more purposefully. All right. So, for this particular example, and we worked through this example in class, day by day, point by point, and trying to develop all the different understanding of these different phases of the essay. So what we did was we're going to have a topic sentence, and then we were just going to go give some evidence or examples, and then we're going to explain that. And then evidence, and then we're going to explain. Evidence, explain. And then our linking sentence. So here it is in a slightly different format. So the proud and confident figure of Stalin, the great leader, is the dominant figure of the image. So our evidence. He stands tall, with his chest raised, exhibiting determined and confident body language. That's just presenting the evidence. What do we see? Well, what does it mean then? We have to analyse this. This pose creates a strong impression to the Soviet audience and their country as a leader who can face the possible perils of the Soviet future in a bold manner. What's our next piece of evidence? Furthermore, his gaze directed towards the symbolic future is held firm and resolute. And I couldn't work out if unbendable was a better word, so I kind of put that in brackets so it gave us something to talk about. Okay, let's explain that, which implies he will meet and overcome any crisis or obstacle his country may face. So you got the idea, don't you? So just in a very structured way, let's have some evidence, now let's explain it. Let's have some evidence, now let's explain it. And then we have to have our linking sentence, where, now I don't know if there's any, the school of thought still exists, I know it does still exist, people who think the job of this sentence is to highlight what's going to happen in the next paragraph. Don't believe that at all. What's the point of having a point in the next paragraph if you've already said it in the previous paragraph? And this particular draft of this textbook that I was reading was kind of implying that you should do that, which I was a bit worried about. Okay. So, I reckon, job of this is to tell us what all this has told us about the thesis. Consequently, these elements combine to create the overall strong impression presented in the poster that Stalin is physically and psychologically armed to lead his people. Okay, so what do we learn there? Only one point is examined, that's body language, but we've used 3 pieces of evidence to do that. Evidence or an example is often described first before it is explained or elaborated on. This, however, can vary to add variety to the structure, But you've got to know the difference between if you're giving evidence or you're explaining the evidence. Okay. In our next paragraph, we're going to look at linking words. Okay. So basically we have this table, we have a few linking words that we could possibly use. Then we're going to do a brainstorm of the nautical references. Then what do these nautical references suggest about his leadership? Because remember, we have to stay on track. We have to be always focusing on this thing called the thesis. In the real estate game, they talk about the ABC of real estate, always be closing. Okay, from the moment that the real estate agent gets the booking to sell the house, they are in the process of trying to close the deal. Everything they do is about closing the deal. Every telephone call they make, every piece of suggestion they give to the seller, how they set up for the open house, okay, how they meet and talk to the buyers coming through. Always be closing. Same deal with the analytical exposition. Everything has to be about proving this thesis. Okay, don't go waffling off on some other track. Get yourself on the track. This is the thesis. Every thing that I'm going to write is about proving that thesis. Okay. So let's just concentrate then on those linking words and phrases, and you've got that on your handout. So we would have noticed some in the previous paragraph anyway. Okay. Because they're there. All these features appear in all of these paragraphs. We're just going to be highlighting one feature each time. So other key visual features that portray Stalin's leadership capabilities are the overt nautical references. That's what this paragraph's going to be about. But what do these overt nautical references say about his leadership? The most obvious of these is the steering wheel. Clearly signifies. The clear symbolic connection is therefore made. Furthermore, blah, 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 his success in navigating these perils demonstrates. And then we have our linking sentence. These visual references to the sea, ships and navigation graphically convey the Russian leader in a commanding light. What does that look like? Well, let's have a look at the rules first. Underline words and phrases are cohesive ties or signposts that link ideas, draw conclusions or add to a new piece of evidence. They create cohesion and fluency. They are vital. And holy smokes, in analytical essays, the language terminology of analysis is tied up with the cohesive ties. A couple of years ago when they were doing the trial external exam in schools, we did that. They were kind of suggesting that the questions could be about evaluation or analysis. They were all about analysis. So the word evaluation only appears like once or twice in the whole new syllabus. The word evaluation only appears once or twice. The word analysis is like a rash over the whole thing. So it seems as though analysis is the language that we're going for. That's why I've got a page of my kind of attempts to try and get all those words and phrases, well not all of them, but some of them, going, so that we can have those as a reference point. Okay, and so when we're talking about this creates, this demonstrates, this piece of evidence, in presenting this piece of evidence, then that's where the analysis comes in. And so the syllabus objectives, unit objectives in the new syllabus keep talking about analysis. Okay, so I think that's where it's going. Don't take my word for it. Let's just read that same paragraph without the cohesive ties and see if it's as effective. Key visual features that portray Stalin's leadership capabilities are the overt nautical references. The steering wheel in the foreground is emblazoned with the initial CCCP. Stalin, gripping the wheel, is steering his nation on the course he has set. The clear symbolic connection is made between the wheel and his dominant presence in the country. The implied presence, see, it's not as effective. It's not too bad, but it's not as effective. It hasn't got the furthermore as well as blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, in the last body paragraph, we're looking at the red flag. And let's just have a look at what we're going to highlight here. It's that theme in the topic sentence. The omnipresent red flag and its associated link to the leader. First of all, the red flag is proudly flying in the breeze behind the opposing leader of the USSR, Stalin. This juxtaposition between Stalin and the red flag represents the close connection between himself and the government he runs. Moreover, it is a rallying symbol for all Soviets to fall behind Stalin, as well as a reminder of the richer meaning of the flag's symbolism and tradition, namely its colour being derived from the blood of the martyrs who have died in the cause of socialism. The people's flag is deepest red, it shrouded oft our martyred dead, and though our limbs grew stiff and cold, its lifeblood dyed its every fold. Are you Tommies out there? Therefore, the use of the familiar red flag is a powerful device to evoke the patriotism for the cause of the Communist Party and ultimately Stalin. All right, it's a great marking tool when you're marking a student's essay to try and identify if there is a point in their topic sentence, and then try and track that same point in the language that the student's is using through that whole paragraph. And if you don't, and if you then start seeing other ideas, then the paragraph's going off track. The paragraph's not sticking to the particular point that it's trying to prove. Okay, so I just think that's a good, a worthwhile tool for students that they can evaluate the quality of their own paragraph, but also us as teachers that we can, all right, you know, you're marking a whole pile of these things. You're up to your 25th essay, and you're starting to be a bit jaded, and you've forgotten what it is that you're looking for. You can just remind yourself, okay, I've got to get my head around this. Let's see if this paragraph's any good. I've just read it 3 times. It's just not working for me. And you can work out why. Okay, so is there an obvious theme throughout each paragraph? Does your choice of evidence examples relate directly to the idea? Are you explaining or elaborating on this point? Can you track this theme throughout the paragraph? Okay, so we've had a look at those 3 body paragraphs, each with emphasising something a little bit different, but all those ideas need to operate in every paragraph. Okay, and I think we could probably talk longer about that language of analysis idea too, but maybe another day. Okay. Now, so what does this conclusion thing look like? Well, what I tried to do a few years ago now was write a whole pile of really good conclusions. Really had my thinking cap on, and then got the best ones, and then tried to analyse what it was about those best ones that seemed to work. And it seemed to be the formula was something like this. Make a statement about what the essay has revealed about the topic. Do not say this essay has, blah, blah, blah. Describe how the revelation has been arrived at. Maybe some other conclusions were made along the way. And then a final clarifying or definitive statement on the thesis. Okay, and so that was my attempt at that particular essay. In the proof of that new textbook that I was reading, they did have a pretty good concluding paragraph, I think, for the sample. And when I had a look at that, I sort of thought, well, they did what has been proven, how is it proven, any extra detail, and a reference to the question and a final reflection on the thesis. And that seemed to be pretty close to what my version was. So we seem to be along the same lines there. But I think conclusions are hard to write. The linking sentences are hard to write. There are some parts of essays that are just trickier than others, and then we have to be aware of that and have to be giving the right advice about how to approach those things. So having a bit of a formula to follow for that concluding paragraph, I think, is necessary. Okay. All right. That's a wasted slide, isn't it? Okay. So also on your handout, I've got this checklist of things that students need to know. So these are all those things that I'm emphasising as we've been trotting through this. So I think might be a reference point, that thing you can take with you. Okay. So what are some other general ideas then? Well, I think we need to set students up in the early years for understanding and success. And so that's introducing these ideas of paragraph writing, essay writing as early as possible, understanding where it is that they're going, giving them the language that they need. So that particular example that we just walked our way through was year 10, but we certainly do, well, I've got a guy who's running things in year 7 at the moment, and they actually did an analytical essay in year 7 with great success too. We're pretty fortunate we've got 7 lessons a week to devote to English at 7, 8 and 9, so there's a little bit of extra time that we've got to play with there. So, so as early as possible, I think, to introduce them to these concepts. Paragraph responses must be explicitly teach the phases, stages, features and functions of the paragraph and the analytical essay. So that's your job. Set topics that students will want to write about. Okay, we did the Cinderella Man in one of our units. We did this history versus Hollywood thing, and we've done Seabiscuit in the past and Pocahontas, and but the Russell Crowe movie now, it's not politically incorrect to watch that. The Cinderella Man, and so it was really interesting subject matter. And part of the interesting subject matter is Max Baer, who's portrayed as a bad guy in that, who's actually Max Baer Jr.'s father, who's Jethro in the Beverly Hillbillies, by the way. Told you boxing was interesting. He is portrayed as this killer, killed men in the ring, and is a Lothario, and not a very nice person. And but when you look at the history, that's not quite the case. Okay, so the students really got into that stuff. What else do we learn? Okay, let's carefully word our tasks that allow for a well-formulated response with a thesis and a series of clearly defined points. So this is an oldie but a goodie, I think. Tomorrow When the War Began. Discuss how in the course of the novel, the narrator, Ellie, transforms from an innocent teenage schoolgirl into a formidable warrior. Refer to 3 key events in the novel to demonstrate this transformation. Okay, bang, bang, bang. We've got our 3 paragraphs. Okay, building up fitness to write analytically under exam conditions. So that's, paragraphs in class, writing a paragraph over a series of lessons, essay over a series of lessons. All right, it's just getting into training for the big show at the end of year 12 in a couple of years' time. Okay, careful structuring, drafting, short tasks, exam conditions but with notes, structures, word lists. So when we do we're setting more and more tasks under exam conditions, but with some controls. So allowing our junior students to use this words and phrases sheet. I'll just have a zoom in of one of those. So other ways to say this can be seen by. You've got some versions of that on, you haven't got the whole thing there, but you've got some of those on your handout. Or we're adding or listing ideas, that sort of language. So we allow those things in the junior classes, but then we take away the training wheels, of course, when they have to get marked for the real deal. Okay. What else can we do? Gradually less feedback, tasks of greater length, tasks of greater complexity, to mirror future conditions that they're going to have to face. All right. And so this language of analysis thing. So that was the first version. The one that you've got in front of you there has probably got another 15 or 20 words, which I kind of, I missed those the first time around. What I did was I read a bunch of old sample essays that I read and then grabbed all the analytical words out of that and whacked it back into that table. Okay. Now, I'm kind of torn about doing this or getting you guys to do some drama with me. Let's just quickly talk about this, and then I'll get some of you guys to do a bit of drama. Okay, so we're going to have to be, getting students to practice this unseen analytical exam. So we want to be setting all sorts of topics and all sorts of tasks. And I think I was getting a bit hung up on trying to word the most fantastic task going, because there's no guarantee that the wording of the task that the students are going to get is going to be any good. That's a naive assumption on our part. Hopefully it will be, and that we will have been modelling really well worded topics. But what if they're stinkers? They have to be, aware in that sort of in that cauldron of that particular day to be able to work it out. Macbeth again. Thanks. So look, what I was originally planning on doing with the list of questions that you've I've put there, all about Macbeth, was just try and work out which are the best ones. But I think, who cares? Maybe we just have to try and, if you are going to study Macbeth for the final exam, then look at badly worded topics and look at ones that are better, and the students are going to have to be able to come up with something themselves. This was the wording in this textbook that I'll be talking about. Analyse how readers of blah 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 are positioned to view such and such. All right, that sounds okay. Analyse how Macbeth Shakespeare firstly disrupts and then re-establishes the political and moral order of Scotland. Yeah, I thought that was okay. And then what I've got there, which I won't talk any more about it than I've already done so, were these those ones that you've got in front of you. So you can fight amongst yourselves about the quality or not of those particular ones. Okay, so I've been talking a little bit about this this upcoming exam. What I just need some volunteers to do just a little drama activity. And while I get the volunteers, you're going to have to read a bit of Hamlet. So if you're keen, please just lie it back there and come out the front. Thank you. Very simple. Whichever colour bit you've got is your character. The volunteers is very easy. Thank you. Wonderful. All right, well, these ladies come out the front and have a quick look at what they're going to have to read. Just need to standing up across the front here. So, we're having to make in schools decisions about, which text that we're going to be looking at for this Unit 4 final exam. And look, you don't need to listen to me, I don't know much, but I'm just thinking that for the group of students that I've got in front of me, perhaps doing a play might be the best choice for us. And if we're going to have to be familiar with the text, I think it'd be easier to be familiar with a smaller text like a play than a big chunky novel. And if they're going to have to be familiar with some some quotations perhaps to make in that particular essay, then maybe learning and being familiar with quotations from a play might work better than that as well. Okay, so this is the thing. I think I picked this idea up at an ETAC conference. It was a handout from one of the Shakespeare mock called, it was Macbeth gone in 28 seconds. And it was just like a random blurb about Macbeth. But this is Hamlet gone in 100 seconds. And we have got time, so basically, ladies, when I say go, you're going to have 100 seconds to try and whiz your way through that script, okay? Just hold on. There's going to be a stopwatch behind you, put you under a bit of pressure. We'll just have a little practice there. Now, I'm just more familiar with that one. I did do an extra one which is all about Macbeth, but it's all about blood quotes. And so it struck me as well, we could be doing this with, you could get all the power quotes, you could get all the ones about Lady Macbeth and her development sort of quotes, and they'd be great little warm-ups for the study of a particular text over a number of, several weeks or months or however long we're going to be doing this. And so there'll be this accumulation of familiarity of knowledge about particular themes perhaps. And so look, if they've If they whiz through this one, we might get them to do the blood one as well. Okay? So, we ready, girls? They are all girls. Ladies? Sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm old. Okay, go!
This bodes some strange eruption to our state.
Forget it, not our dear brother's death, the memory we grieve. Thou know'st 'tis common, all that lives must die.
Faster.
Cast thy night colour off.
By oat, are by, 'tis an unweaved garden that grows to seed. Frailty, thy name is woman.
Each word made true and good, the apparition comes.
My father's spirit in arms, all is not well.
Then weigh what loss your honour may sustain, if with true Cretan ear you list his songs.
Oh good, my brother, do not as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven.
This above all, to thine own self be true.
O Lord, he hath importuned me with love.
Revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. The serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown.
The time is out of joint, I curse the spite, that ever I was born to set it right. To be or not to be, that is the question. Get thee to a nunnery.
Oh, what a noble mind is here overthrown.
That he is mad, 'tis true. 'Tis true, 'tis pity, and pity 'tis true.
I like him not, nor stands it safe with us to let his madness range.
I am pigeon-livered and lack gall. I should have fattened all the region heights with this slave's awful, bloody, bawdy villain. Remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain, O vengeance.
Oh my sorry, that's not in red. Oh my offence is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest cursed upon a brother's murder.
I ensconce me even here. Oh, I am slain. Do not forget, this visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose.
Prepare thyself for England. Thy letters congruing the present death of Hamlet.
How all occasions do inform against me.
There's rosemary, that's for remembrance, and there's pansies, that's for thoughts.
A document in madness.
That is, will you be ruled by me? Requite him for your father.
I will do it.
Your sister's drowned, Laertes.
What, the fair Ophelia?
The devil take thy soul.
The queen carouses to thy fortune, Hamlet.
Gertrude, do not drink.
They bleed on both sides.
I am poisoned.
I can no more. The king's to blame.
Here, thou incestuous, murderous damned Dane, wretched queen of Jew. Oh, I die, Horatio.
Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Well done. Only a minute too slow though. It can be done in 100 seconds. Thank you very much. Look, yeah, sorry if I didn't have all the red stuff. You can keep that if you like. Yeah, okay, we won't do the next one. Look, many thanks, folks. Did I put my website on the, well, not my website, I've got a website. My email is there, so yeah, happy to send you any stuff out that people want copies of. So thanks for your attention.
I just want to kind of take, we don't have any time for questions, but I want to take Thanker's prerogative, which is to just say something to bounce off that, if you don't mind. And you just said something that was so important for me, which was this idea of analysis being all throughout this syllabus in a way that maybe was unexpected. And I think that's such a helpful resource, with all the Mazzano verbs and all the different things going on there. Time will tell, right? I mean, if you go back to 2010, it wasn't an analysis, was it? It was create and evaluate. And so time will tell whether the markers of this exam really are, if there's a hidden curriculum and they're still expecting evaluation. And so I just would caution against going too hard with analysis only. You're absolutely right. How can we get students at year 12 just doing analysis with no evaluation? So time will tell, and we're all in this together. And thank you so much for the product that you've put around that for us. Thanks.